Reading of chapter, Breathing and Exchange of Gases. Introduction. As you have read earlier, oxygen, O2, is utilized by the organisms to indirectly break down simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, etc., to derive energy to perform various activities. Carbon dioxide, CO2, which is harmful, is also released during the above catabolic reactions. It is, therefore, evident that O2 has to be continuously provided to the cells and CO2 produced by the cells have to be released out. This process of exchange of O2 from the atmosphere with CO2 produced by the cells is called breathing, commonly known as respiration. Place your hands on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to breathing. How do we breathe? The respiratory organs and the mechanism of breathing are described in the following sections of this chapter. Respiratory organs. Mechanisms of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitats and levels of organization. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelenterates, flatworms, etc., exchange O2 with CO2 by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Earthworms use their moist cuticle, and insects have a network of tubes, tracheal tubes, to transport atmospheric air within the body. Special vascularized structures called gills, branchial respiration, are used by most of the aquatic arthropods and mollusks, whereas vascularized bags called lungs, pulmonary respiration, are used by the terrestrial forms for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals respire through lungs. Amphibians like frogs can respire through their moist skin, cutaneous respiration, also. Human respiratory system. We have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. It leads to a nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, a portion of which is the common passage for food and air. The pharynx opens through the larynx region into the trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production and hence called the sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra into a right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergoes repeated divisions to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, ending up in very thin terminal bronchioles. The tracheae, primary, secondary and tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular-walled and vascularized bag-like structures called alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli comprise the lungs, figure 14.1. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura, with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic. This is a diagrammatic view of human respiratory system. Sectional view of the left lung is also shown. From top it is epiglottis, then larynx, trachea, bronchus, cut end of ribs, lungs, diaphragm, bronchioles, pleural fluid, alveoli, pleural membrane. Human respiratory system continued lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lung surface. The part starting with the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part, whereas the alveoli and their ducts form the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. The conducting part transports the atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears it from foreign particles, humidifies and also brings the air to body temperature. Exchange part is the site of actual diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column, ventrally by the sternum, laterally by the ribs and on the lower side by the dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of lungs in thorax is such that any change in the volume of the thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung, pulmonary, cavity. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. Respiration involves the following steps. I. Breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and CO2 rich alveolar air is released out. E. Diffusion of gases, O2 and CO2, across alveolar membrane. E. Transport of gases by the blood. IV. Diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and tissues. V. Utilization of O2 by the cells for catabolic reactions and resultant release of CO2. Cellular respiration as dealt in the chapter 12. Mechanism of breathing. Breathing involves two stages: inspiration, during which atmospheric air is drawn in, and expiration, by which the alveolar air is released out. The movement of air into and out of the lungs is carried out by creating a pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs, intrapulmonary pressure, is less than the atmospheric pressure, i.e., there is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to atmospheric pressure. Similarly, expiration takes place when the intrapulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. The diaphragm and a specialized set of muscles, external and internal intercostals between the ribs, help in generation of such gradients. Inspiration is initiated by the contraction of diaphragm, which increases the volume of thoracic chamber in the antero-posterior axis. The contraction of external intercostal muscles lifts up the ribs and the sternum, causing an increase in the volume of the thoracic chamber in the dorso-ventral axis. The overall increase in the thoracic volume causes a similar increase in pulmonary volume. An increase in pulmonary volume decreases the intrapulmonary pressure to less than the atmospheric pressure, which forces the air from outside to move into the lungs, i.e., inspiration, figure 14.2a. Relaxation of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles returns the diaphragm and sternum to their normal positions and reduce the thoracic volume and thereby the pulmonary volume. This leads to an increase in intrapulmonary pressure to slightly above the atmospheric pressure, causing the expulsion of air from the lungs, i.e., expiration, figure 14.2b. We have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen. On an average, a healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. The volume of air involved in breathing movements can be estimated by using a spirometer, which helps in clinical assessment of pulmonary functions. This diagram shows the mechanical changes in the chest cavity, thorax, that allow air to enter the lungs. Here's a step-by-step breakdown. Diaphragm contracts, the dome-shaped diaphragm muscle at the base of the chest contracts and flattens, moving downwards. Rib cage expands, the muscles between the ribs, intercostal muscles, contract, causing the ribs and sternum, breastbone, to be lifted upwards and outwards. Thoracic volume increases. Both of these actions, the diaphragm moving down and the rib cage moving out, significantly increase the volume inside the thoracic cavity. Air enters lungs. According to Boyle's law, this increase in volume leads to a decrease in pressure inside the lungs, making it lower than the atmospheric pressure outside the body. This pressure difference forces air to rush into the lungs to equalize the pressure. Part 2 of this chapter will be available soon. Thanks for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe.